But her sentence has been put on hold, and it has to do with her attorneys trying to get the judge disqualified.
This is the story of how the first person convicted in the murder of Jacksonville rapper Julio Fulio received a manslaughter charge instead of first-degree murder, leaving many questions about justice unanswered. When 26-year-old Charles Andrew Jones II, known professionally as Julio Fulio, was shot and killed in a Tampa hotel parking lot on June 23, 2024, prosecutors called it a premeditated gang hit. 5 people got arrested, but when the first defendant stood trial in October 2025, the jury delivered a verdict that shocked everyone following the case. To understand what happened in that courtroom, we need to go back to the deadly world Fulio came from. June 21, 1998. That's when Charles Andrew Jones II was born in Jacksonville, Florida, in the Moncrief neighborhood, specifically in the Hilltop Apartments, one of the most notorious areas in the city. Violence surrounded him from the start, and when he was just 13 years old in 2011, his father, Charles Andrew Jones, was murdered in a Jacksonville shooting. Fulio joined the six-block set of a street gang called KDA, which stands for Kill Them All, and he turned his experiences into music. His 2019 mixtape Never Wanted Fame was described as being consumed with death, jail visits, ailing family members, and creeping paranoia. 3 albums followed: Life of Me in 2022, Final Destination in 2023, and Resurrection in 2024, released just months before his death. But here's the thing, Fulio wasn't just making music about street life, he was living it and documenting every moment. A tragedy in 2017 set off years of bloodshed that would eventually lead to Fulio's murder. His 18-year-old cousin, Zion Malik Brown, was shot and killed in his home, and this is believed to have started a deadly gang war in Jacksonville between Fulio's six-block gang, associated with KTA, and rival gangs called ATK, which stands for Ace's Top Killers, and 1200. The war escalated in 2018 when a retaliatory shooting wounded rapper Youngin Ace and killed his brother and 2 friends. What Fulio did next made everything worse. He posted derogatory content about the victims on social media, turning a street beef into a public spectacle. The conflict spilled into the music. Youngin Ace released Who I Smoke in 2021, which led to Fulio firing back with When I See You, and these 2 tracks are credited with starting the Florida drill music scene. Fulio's video for When I See You, a remix of a Fantasia song, featured printed-out news coverage of the quadruple shooting that had left Youngin Ace in critical condition and killed his brother and 2 best friends. Fulio also memorialized the people he'd lost in the war. Bibi's story was dedicated to his 16-year-old brother Bibi Osama, whose real name was Adrian Gaynor, who had been killed because of the ATK beef. The violence wasn't confined to lyrics. July 2023 brought a shooting in Houston, Texas that wounded Fulio, and in an interview he claimed he shot back in self-defense with a registered gun. 3 months later, on October 7, 2023, someone shot him in the foot while he was driving in Jacksonville. By April 2024, Fulio posted on Instagram about the tragic multiple attempts on my life. His mother, Sandricus Mays, would later explain to Newsweek, "We have to understand that Charles wasn't getting shot at because he killed somebody, because he robbed somebody, because anything like that. That's not what happened. All this happened because of rapping." The conflict between these Jacksonville gangs had been raging since 2014 or 2015, according to Fulio's mother, and nobody could stop it. June 2024 arrived, and Fulio decided to celebrate his 26th birthday in Tampa, away from the violence of Jacksonville. What he did next was a fatal mistake. He posted his location on social media not once, but multiple times. Over 7 days leading up to his birthday, Fulio broadcasted on Instagram that he was coming to Tampa and would be at a club called Teasers on June 22nd between 8 p.m. and 3 a.m. 5 people from Jacksonville saw those posts and began making their way to Tampa on June 22nd, 2024. And according to prosecutors, they had one goal: find and kill Julio Fulio in retaliation for the ongoing gang war. Isaiah Chance Jr., 21, a documented member of the ATK gang, led the group. Sean Gathright, 18, joined him. Rashad Murphy, 30, a documented member of the 1200 gang, came along with his associate Davian Murphy. And then there was Isaiah Chance's girlfriend, 21-year-old Alicia Andrews. 2 vehicles made the trip. Andrews and Chance drove together in a silver Chevy Cruze, while the others followed in a black Chevy Impala. Fulio's celebration started at an Airbnb in Holiday, Florida, but the night went sideways when the owner realized they'd exceeded the occupancy rate and called the cops. Fulio and his group got kicked out and had to scramble to find a hotel. The Jacksonville crew was tracking every movement. They followed Fulio to 2 nightclubs he'd publicly advertised he would attend, including Teaser's Gentlemen's Club where Fulio was being paid to perform. Tampa Police Chief Lee Burkaw later explained that Fulio posted his location on social media several times throughout the night, and security footage captured the suspects following him from location to location. This shows the lengths that these individuals were willing to go through and achieve this murder, the police chief said. Prosecutors built a theory that Andrews and Chance operated as a tracking team. The silver Cruze would arrive first at each location to scope it out. Then the black Impala carrying the shooters would roll up behind them. 4:15 a.m. on June 23rd, Fulio was followed to a Holiday Inn near the University of South Florida, but instead of following him into the parking lot, the suspect staged across the street and waited. 23 minutes later, at 4:38 a.m., 3 shooters climbed out of the black vehicle wearing masks and disguises. One carried a handgun with an extended high-capacity magazine, and 2 had rifles with brass catchers attached. They walked into the hotel parking lot where Fulio sat in a car with 3 other people. The shooting started. The gunman with the pistol fired more than 30 times while the 2 with rifles added their own barrage. Fulio took bullets to the heart, lungs, and aorta, and paramedics pronounced him dead at the scene. 3 other people in the car were wounded but survived. Fulio died on his birthday, just hours after turning 26. About a month passed before Tampa police held a press conference on July 29, 2024, to announce arrests. Sean Gathright, Alicia Andrews, and Isaiah Chance Jr. were taken into custody in Jacksonville, and Rashad Murphy was arrested less than 24 hours after that announcement. Davian Murphy stayed on the run for nearly 6 months before getting captured in January 2025. All 5 faced charges of first-degree premeditated murder with a firearm. The state of Florida announced plans to seek the death penalty for Chance, Gathright, and Rashad Murphy, but Alicia Andrews was notably absent from the death penalty notice. Fulio's mother, Sandrika Smoes, released a statement. "I'm thankful for the capture of 5 suspects that had involvement with the murder of my son, Charles Jones II. I never once did not believe that those responsible wouldn't be caught. But getting arrested and getting convicted are completely different outcomes. And when Alicia Andrews went to trial in October 2025, the case against her turned out to be more complicated than prosecutors probably hoped. Alicia Andrews was slated to be the first of the 5 defendants to face a jury. Her trial was originally set for January 6, 2025, but delays kept pushing it back. August 18, 2025 was the next date, but that got scrapped when the lead prosecutor ended up hospitalized. Jury selection finally began on October 20, 2025 in Tampa. Her defense team came in with a clear strategy from the start. Paint her as a victim, not a co-conspirator. Before the trial even started, her attorneys wanted to introduce evidence of domestic violence, planning to argue that Andrews was trapped in an abusive relationship with Isaiah Chance and was acting under duress. Judge Michelle Cisco shut that down, ruling that domestic violence couldn't be brought up as evidence because it would violate Florida law. When Andrews' attorney expressed disappointment about not being able to mention it in his opening statement, Judge Cisco had a response. "I know, I would like to be 20 lbs lighter. However, that's not going to happen anytime soon." 8 days of testimony followed. Prosecutors laid out their case that Andrews wasn't some innocent bystander caught up in her boyfriend's plans, arguing she actively helped track and surveil Fulio as he moved between Tampa nightclubs. Because she wasn't part of her boyfriend's gang, the others used her cell phone and car to help them avoid detection. Phone records revealed that while Andrews and Chance were together, Chance was using Andrews' phone to make calls to Sean Gathright, who was traveling in the other car. The prosecution had a particularly damning piece of evidence. Text messages from January 2021 when Andrews was 17 years old, where she wrote that Fulio needed to die. Prosecutors argued this proved motive. Surveillance footage captured Andrews at one of the nightclub parking lots wearing a face mask, and there was also evidence that Andrews followed Fulio on Instagram, despite her negative feelings about him. But the prosecution hit a wall. They had no direct evidence that Andrews knew about the murder plot. Tampa Police Detective Juan Ramos testified during cross-examination that no direct evidence existed of Andrews' knowledge of a plot to kill Fulio. Andrews wasn't present when weapons were being packed, and video evidence showed she wasn't at Gathrights' house when the planning went down. While the male co-defendants went to Teaser's nightclub to surveil Fulio, Andrews was separated from the group, staying back at the Airbnb where she posted on social media about jewelry and food. The detective confirmed that Andrews had a limited relationship with her co-defendants, with no evidence of an ongoing relationship with any of them except her boyfriend, Isaiah Chance. October 31st, 2025. Alicia Andrews took the stand in her own defense, a risky move that her attorneys believed was necessary. Andrews testified that on June 22nd, 2024, she asked Chance what he was doing that day, and he told her he was going out of town. She asked if she could come along. He told her to pack her things, and she claimed she never knew they were headed to Tampa and had zero knowledge of any murder plot. They went to an Airbnb that she didn't book, she said, and later they went to 2 nightclubs that were publicly advertised for Fulio's appearance. But she maintained she had no idea they were there to hunt for Fulio. Chance would take her phone and make calls, Andrews testified, but she never knew who he was calling and never bothered to ask why. After they left the second nightclub, she said Chance drove them to a parking lot and got out of the car with her phone for a few minutes, and that's when she heard gunshots as they were driving away from the area. She claimed she didn't know anyone was going to be killed or shot. Everyone at the Airbnb was acting weird the next day, she said, and she took an Uber back to Jacksonville with Chance because Gathright had somewhere else to be. Andrews admitted to deleting text messages with Chance after Fulio was killed. The prosecution's cross-examination zeroed in on her credibility, bringing up those 21 text messages where she'd written that Fulio needed to die. "Yeah, but I didn't mean it. I was 17 and just gossiping," Andrews told the jury. The defense showed jurors images of bruises on Andrews' face and presented text messages where Chance got upset when she would post images of herself on Instagram. Andrews testified that she avoided disagreements with Chance because they could lead to him hitting her or breaking her phone. She told the jury she was terrified of her controlling boyfriend, and she even claimed that while Chance sat in jail awaiting trial, a corrections officer informed her that Chance had tried to have her jumped by other inmates. About the face mask she wore at the nightclub, Andrews explained it was to avoid the smoke in the air because she was pregnant at the time, not to hide her identity. When prosecutors asked why she was still afraid of Chance if he was locked up behind bars, she pointed to the alleged attempt to have her attacked in jail. Tension filled the courtroom during her testimony. A shouting match erupted outside the courtroom at one point, as accusations of gang ties flew between people in the gallery, and there were even accusations that the defense team had been secretly photographing gallery members. Andrews was the final witness to testify. Closing arguments wrapped up on Friday, October 31st, and the jury began deliberating. Nearly 4 hours passed. When they returned, they delivered a split verdict that would spark controversy. The jury found Alicia Andrews guilty of manslaughter, a lesser-included offense of the first-degree murder charge, but they found her not guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. Manslaughter in Florida carries a maximum penalty of 15 years in prison. Andrews would be held without bond until her sentencing, scheduled for December 8, 2025 at 8:30 a.m. The verdict meant that the jury believed Andrews bore some responsibility for Fulio's death, but they didn't believe she intended for him to be killed or that she conspired with the others to murder him. For many people following the case, this felt deeply unsatisfying. Here was someone who traveled from Jacksonville to Tampa with a group of gang members who then killed Fulio, who had been in the car that tracked him, whose phone had been used to coordinate with the shooters, who had written years earlier that Fulio needed to die. And yet the murder charge didn't stick. But the story didn't end there. December 8th arrived, the date Andrews was supposed to be sentenced, and nothing happened. 4 days earlier, on December 4th, 2025, just before she was set to face sentencing, Andrews filed a legal document called a writ of prohibition, seeking to disqualify Judge Michelle Cisco from any further participation in her case. She also requested that her sentencing be stayed, meaning delayed. Jeremy McClymont, one of Andrews' attorneys, explained when reached for comment that the team requested a delay in sentencing to ensure that Ms. Andrews' rights are protected. The motion worked. A state appeals court granted the request to disqualify Judge Cisco from conducting Andrews' sentencing hearing by late January 2026. So right now, Alicia Andrews has been convicted of manslaughter in the death of Julio Fulio, but she hasn't been sentenced. She faces up to 15 years in prison, but when that sentencing will actually happen, or who will preside over it, remains unclear. The other four defendants, Isaiah Chance Jr., Sean Gathright, Rashad Murphy, and Davian Murphy, are scheduled to go to trial in April 2026, and three of them face the death penalty if convicted. Throughout all of this, one voice has been notably absent from verified reporting: Fulio's mother, Sandricus Mays. After her son was killed in June 2024, she posted on Instagram, "The story that only I can tell because I know the truths from the fakes. I think I'm the only mother that keeps it real, while most others know damn well what was going on with their own sons." This has been going on since 2014, 2015. She announced plans for a documentary, R.I.P. Son, Charles Jones II, Fulio. The real-life story documentary coming soon. After the final suspect was arrested in January 2025, she released a statement saying she was thankful for the capture of all 5 suspects and that she never doubted they would be caught. But after the verdict against Alicia Andrews came down, there's no verified statement from her in mainstream news sources. Unverified references on the social media platform TikTok suggest she wants Andrews to receive the maximum 15-year sentence, but these can't be confirmed through reliable news reporting. This absence speaks volumes. For a mother who lost her son to gang violence, and who watched as drill music and social media posts transformed a neighborhood beef into a deadly war that claimed multiple lives, the conviction of just one person on a lesser charge must feel woefully insufficient. This case raises difficult questions about justice and accountability. The jury in Andrews' case clearly wrestled with the evidence in front of them. On one hand, she was there. She traveled to Tampa with the group. Her phone was used to coordinate, and she had expressed hatred for Fulio years earlier. On the other hand, no direct evidence proved she knew about the murder plot. She wasn't present when weapons were packed. She stayed behind while others did surveillance, and her defense presented evidence that she was trapped in an abusive relationship. The jury landed on a middle ground. She bore some responsibility for what happened, but she wasn't a murderer. Does that middle ground satisfy justice? Fulio is still dead. 3 shooters ambushed him and fired more than 30 shots, murdering him because of a gang war that had been raging for years, a war fueled by social media posts and diss tracks, and a cycle of retaliation that nobody seemed able or willing to stop. Fulio's mother told Newsweek that her son wasn't being shot at because he killed somebody or robbed somebody. All this happened because of rapping, she said. Think about that. A 26-year-old man was hunted down and murdered in a hotel parking lot on his birthday because of music, because of lyrics, because of social media posts about dead rivals, because of a beef that started when teenagers were killed and other teenagers responded with more killing. And the Jacksonville gang war that killed Fulio has been going on since 2014 or 2015, which means more than a decade of bloodshed. Fulio's cousin was killed in 2017. Youngeen Ace's brother and friends were killed in 2018. Fulio's brother Bibby was killed. Multiple attempts were made on Fulio's life in 2023 and early 2024 before the final successful one in June 2024. And now the first person convicted in his murder gets a manslaughter charge and faces up to 15 years while the alleged shooters still await trial. The story of Julio Fulio's murder and the conviction of Alicia Andrews shows us how complicated justice can be. Gang violence, social media, and drill music have created a toxic cycle where young people kill each other and document it in real time. Even when prosecutors build a case and make arrests and go to trial, the outcome isn't always what the victim's family hopes for. Alicia Andrews didn't pull the trigger, and the jury believed that mattered. Whether you agree with that verdict depends on how you answer a question about criminal justice. Is being present at a murder, helping to track the victim, and doing nothing to stop it the same as murdering someone? The jury said no. Many people, quite possibly including Fulio's mother, would say yes. What we know for certain is this. 5 people traveled from Jacksonville to Tampa on June 23, 2024, with the apparent intent to kill Julio Fulio. They tracked him to multiple locations. 3 of them shot him more than 30 times, and he died on his 26th birthday. The first person tried for involvement in his murder was convicted of manslaughter, not murder, and she has not yet been sentenced. 4 others await trial, and the Jacksonville gang war that led to all of this, it's still going on. That's the real tragedy here. Fulio's death wasn't the end of anything, just another chapter in a war that has claimed too many young lives and will likely claim more before it's over. Justice for Julio Fulio may have started with a guilty verdict against Alicia Andrews, but for his mother and family, for everyone who knew him, that verdict probably feels like just the beginning of a very long journey toward accountability. And given that the person convicted wasn't even one of the shooters, it's a journey that may never reach a satisfying destination.